You're now tuned into youtube.com/Eric Simon, where he'll be doing a review for the new Weekend album.
Did that sound kind of out of place to you and like it didn't really fit in? Well, try listening to this album. Dawn FM, new album by The Weeknd, kind of just came out of nowhere. But you know what? I was very excited for this. I do like The Weeknd overall. I'm by no means a huge fan of him or would say that he's like one of my favorite artists in mainstream music, but I like him okay. I think out of all of the artists that have been doing this 80s thing, having 80s sounding music, having that 80s vibe to their music, I think he's easily been one of the best artists that have been doing that. And when you are looking at this album at face value and just looking at it musically, it does very much pick up where After Hours left off. You have all the very 80s compressed drums, all the very crisp sounding synths, really in this album even more. I mean, they really do put a lot of emphasis on the synths in this thing. But I would differentiate this album from After Hours as it seems to really be taking on a lot more different ideas and concepts. Abel himself put out his own interpretation of the album and what it's supposed to mean, what the listener is supposed to, what sort of state they're supposed to be in while they're listening to the album. There are things relating to the afterlife and what happens after we die, and then how we reflect back on our life and certain things we may regret or be proud of. Abel even teases in certain tracks a potential relationship he was involved with in the past where him and their friends were sexually involved, but they weren't romantically involved. They weren't in like a boyfriend-girlfriend thing, kind of like friends with benefits type of situation. But going back to his actual interpretation of this album, he described it as being somewhat of a transition state from death to what comes after death. And that's supposed to be like being stuck in traffic and just waiting for this sort of lull to end. And while this lull is occurring, we're listening to this radio station, and that's where Jim Carrey comes in. He is playing this sort of radio host in the album. He pops in a few different times, and he's supposed to be some sort of guide to our transition to the other side. And I admire all the different things that The Weeknd is going for here, all the different ideas he's trying to tackle and trying to mold into this whole album. But if I'm being honest, this album was just a mess. Really, kind of from the start of it, it just had too many things going on and just too many things it's trying to focus on. And with all these ideas on one plate, I feel like the album really doesn't excel in any of them. With that, there is sort of just a lack of focus and a lack of concentration on the majority of this album, because you have this afterlife type idea that the album goes over and that Abel himself talked about, but then you also have this weird relationship drama, which at times I think is handled okay, but for the most part I think on the execution front really isn't done very well. Then you add in the fact that it's going for these 80s vibes with the music, and then there's this whole radio show host aspect. And I felt that the album just failed to really strike a good balance between all these contrasting ideas. And I just thought the album was kind of a mess from track to track. There was never really a feeling of coherence, at least for the most part. I would say the first half of the album was definitely better than the second half. There was more of a feeling of structure to that first half. This first half did definitely have more songs that I enjoyed on it and did seem to take more risks and be a little bit more experimental. Abel at times will utilize these much more deeper register vocals that were obviously not accustomed to hearing him utilize, but I think he actually does a pretty good job with it. It's pretty off-putting at first, but I think it ends up working well in certain songs such as Gasoline and Sacrifice. The first half also has the song Take My Breath, which I really like. It was a single released way back in August, but I do really like that song. It's a longer version on this album. There's no more downtime at certain parts of the song where it's just an instrumental being played and being looped. And I do prefer the single edit, but I did like this album version. I thought it proved to be a unique experience for listeners. Out of Time was probably one of my personal favorite instrumentals in the entire album. It is sounding straight out of Thriller, Michael Jackson era, which is pretty fitting as it actually follows the Quincy Jones interlude, A Tale by Quincy. However, lyrically speaking, I just don't really think that this song is one of the strongest ones on the album. And that is sort of a running theme I picked up on, at least with my experience with this album, was that there were multiple different songs on it that were nice on the ears aesthetically speaking. They sounded okay. But in terms of the lyrics, in terms of what it's trying to say, I either A, didn't care at all what he was trying to say, or 2, liked the concept but just didn't think it was executed well. And that's something that just happens a lot. It's like I can see how this could be a potentially good track, but the actual execution of it was a big letdown. The first half closes off with this song Here We Go Again, which has a feature from Tyler the Creator. It's a so-so track in my opinion. I like the way it starts off with these very slow, dramatic synths being played. It definitely sets off a more moody and melancholic atmosphere. However, the rest of the song I just found to be pretty underwhelming. I don't think that Tyler's feature was all that great personally, and particularly the way his verse ended, it just felt very out of place. It did remind me of the song Gold Digger because of the prenup line, so that definitely didn't help with it feeling out of place. The second half is really where the album kind of starts to fall apart for me, and I just kind of get tired of it at this point. Best Friends, I think, is one of the weaker cuts on this thing, with these very stereotypical loud synths to start off the song as if it's supposed to be some kind of shock, but it's not. I mean, even the one he did with Post Malone, One Right Now, started off pretty much the exact same way, and I think the song definitely could have used a rewrite as well. Is there someone else sees some really bad use of Chipmunk's soul at the beginning? Thankfully it only pops up like one more time, but I really don't think that was well done at all. And we see an extremely smooth transition from this into the song Starry Eyes. And you know, I'll give credit where credit is due. It was a very good transition. I didn't even realize the next song had started. But, I mean, it's basically just one song. I don't know why you need to split it up into 2. It was like so smooth that it was almost unnecessary. And then we have the interlude, Every Angel is Terrifying, which is sort of this mock advertisement of the afterlife and what the afterlife is like. And I actually think that this is a kind of funny interlude. It's kind of clever. I like the line, critics say afterlife makes your current life look like a total comatose snooze fest. It is actually kind of funny, and Josh Safdie of the Safdie Brothers delivers the interlude here. And I think it does a pretty good job. Skipping ahead, I thought that I Heard You're Married featuring Lil Wayne was one of the standouts on the album. And I do think that there is a somewhat cool twist in the narrative with this song, as he says that he heard that she was married. Lil Wayne's feature was okay. It was nothing great. I did like it more than Tyler the Creator's personally. And I think that he does have a few catchy and clever lines here and there. And then Less Than Zero was, I think, a pretty underwhelming closing track. I mean, it's not the actual closer. There's an interlude that follows this, but the last actual song on the album, I did find it to be a disappointing one to end the thing on. And aesthetically, this is pretty much just a sped up version of Save Your Tears. I mean, that's pretty much it. It's kind of just a faster Save Your Tears. But then the actual thing that ends this album, I think, is probably the best interlude in the entire thing, Phantom Regret, spoken by Jim Carrey. I thought that this interlude really did hint at how good this album possibly could have been if it was just more focused on one or maybe 2 at most central themes, but especially if it was focused on the afterlife idea that The Weeknd himself had his own interpretation formed around, as it does sort of talk on self-reflecting on one's life after you've passed away and you're now moving on to the afterlife. It's easily one of the more self-realized concepts in the album in terms of individual songs. And I'll give props to Jim Carrey as well, because he is actually one of the writers on this interlude, so yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, this album definitely had plenty of potential, I think. As I've said though, I really just think that narratively it was a pretty big mess. It lacked hardly any focus at all. When you look at it simply from a musical experience, the sound of this album, with it being another sort of 80s throwback, it's okay. It's not bad. I think really though it did kind of outstay its welcome, especially in the second half of the album. That was really one of the main reasons why I was kind of just starting to get over it at that point. I didn't hate the album, but I just was kind of disappointed with it. You know, I feel like that dad that says, like, I'm not upset, I'm just disappointed. That's kind of how I feel right now. So with that said, I'm going to give Dawn FM a C-. Here's my rating system if anyone is curious. Who knows, you know, maybe it will grow on me, maybe I'll grow to like it. I have listened to the album multiple times at this point, and I personally just still don't get it. I didn't really think it was that great. Didn't think it was awful, but I just found it extremely underwhelming. But we'll see how this album holds up over time. What did you guys think about it? If you listened to it, I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Let me know some of your favorite tracks. So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for watching if you did get to this point in the video. And I'll see you all later. Peace out.